A new analysis published in the British Medical Journal finds that men are idiots.
We're here today to talk about men.
Men are idiots, and idiots do stupid things.
There you go, right there.
Most of our audience is made up of women, which is to be expected as we talk a lot about fighting gender ideology, which affects women most of all. However, we know that there are men out there who are new to this debate, or don't really understand it at all. If you know a man like this, please share this video with him. It'll hopefully make sense to blokey blokes and manly men, putting it in terms they'll understand.
We're going to have to get a bigger bra. Hey!
All good? Okay, here we go. Lads, listen to this. Your missus has probably put this video in front of you and wants you to watch it. Don't worry, there's nothing difficult or dodgy about it, and you don't have to do anything but watch. We're just going to explain this whole gender debate to you. I know, you don't really want to hear about it, but it's important. So we're going to try and explain it in simple terms. Imagine there are two rival football teams. Let's say it's the Green Bay Packers and the Chicago Bears, for example. Each team has its own proud history, its own distinct identity, its own set of ups and downs over the years. They also have a fierce rivalry with the other team, carried across decades of competition. They each have to live with the other to a large extent, being geographically very close. In fact, the team supporters often work in the same place, interact with each other on a daily basis, and in some cases even live together. But they aren't the same. Ask a fan of either team, they'll tell you how much they dislike, even hate, the other one. Not always, in fact, the majority of fans aren't super hardcore about hating the other team, it's just they'd rather not think about them if they can help it, and want their own team to be more successful. Basically, all sporting rivalries are like this. There have even been cases, although not many, of people switching their allegiance from one team to the other. For most fans this is unthinkable, they can't imagine supporting the rival team at any point, but it does happen. It even happens within the core of the teams themselves. Think of players like Adrian Amos, for example, who played for both the Bears and the Packers. A lot of Packers fans didn't like that signing, but he was eventually accepted. Edgar Bennett is another who went in the opposite direction. So yes, there were always quite rare exceptions to this rivalry, but the divisions were still much greater than these exceptions. But imagine this. Imagine that around 5 years ago a strange thing started happening. Fans from one team started to turn up at the other. They wore the rival shirt over the top of their own teams. They tried to join in with the chants and songs and started talking about how they'd always been a fan of that team. But you and other fans knew differently. You could clearly see the rival's shirt underneath their coats. Some of them were still outright wearing the rival team's jersey, but just had new face paint in the other team's colours. And you were told not to talk about it. Some of the fierce fan base started asking questions about their allegiance. But anyone who questioned it out loud was suddenly ejected from the stadium and ostracised by many others. These new fans then started claiming that they were bigger fans than anyone else. They were given positions of power in supporters groups, and the clubs invited them onto the pitch to celebrate their stories, even while wearing their rivals' colours. And you were told not to talk about it. These new fans started behaving badly, screaming and shouting at any of the old fans who didn't believe that they were truly supporters of the team. They grouped together and took over whole sections of the stadium. They created new flags of a totally different colour and flew them at the games. Everyone could see it happening, but anyone who mentioned it was called old-fashioned or hateful. They were told not to talk about it. These new fans particularly hated the people who had previously played for both teams, calling them scum. This group of fans carried on singing songs about how much they hated their new team, and some were even violent towards the real fans of the team. The league were informed about it, but instead of looking into it, they simply sided with the new fans straight away. They told the proper fans not to talk about it. These new fans went into young supporters groups and started to convince young fans that they shouldn't support this team, but instead they should join their rivals. The new fans convinced some of the younger fans to get permanent, lifelong tattoos of their rivals' logos, often without their parents' consent. The police arrested some of the real fans for speaking out against that. The new fans were given their own TV shows to talk about the team, even though they still wore the rival jersey underneath their clothes. They came up with derogatory terms for the old fans, calling them lesser fans and idiots. Academics wrote entire papers about how one set of fans had always really been fans of their rivals anyway. There wasn't any scientific proof for this, but they still claimed it. And you weren't allowed to talk about it. The government even went along with it, creating new bills that allowed these infiltrating fans to officially be recognised as real supporters of the team. The government arrested anyone who complained about this, and in some cases took away their children. Some government officials couldn't really define what a fan was, but they still backed the infiltrating new supporters. And they ruled that no one was allowed to talk about it. Some of these new fans claimed to be real supporters of the team, when really they were just using that as an excuse to get close to the real fans and start fights with them. But still, you weren't allowed to say that this was wrong. But then a small group of the older fans, the real fans who had spent their entire lives supporting the team, decided they'd had enough of this. They could see that the very identity of the team was changing, and that the team they'd supported all of their lives was now losing itself and becoming something daft. They faced abuse, threats and violence, some even lost their jobs, all because they didn't think that these new fans were real supporters. After all, they still sang the songs and chants of their rivals. Slowly and gradually they made their voices heard. They asked for people to listen to their concerns, asked people to notice what was going on. A few people did, but not many, and not fast enough. Okay, I think we've stretched this analogy to breaking point already, so let's switch back to the gender debate. Everything we've described has and is happening to women, right now. It has been happening for years. Women have their own separate identity, as a group, from men. They're not our rivals, but some men really don't like them. Women are seeing men claim that they are women.
This is why Susie Eddy is. That's why I was putting it that, because that's what's going to be on my passport.
These men wear makeup, but haven't had reassignment surgery. In fact, over 90% of them have no desire to have their bits chopped off at any point. Despite this, they claim to be real women, even if they've led full, happy lives as men, been married to women, or even fathered children. They told women not to question it.
I am a real woman, okay?
Women were ostracised and kicked off social media platforms for doing so. These men regularly state that they are better than real women, for whatever lunatic reason. They've been given positions of power in organisations, institutions, and even the government. One was even made the head of a rape crisis centre in Scotland, and told women that they were bigoted if they didn't want to share their spaces with men in makeup.
And I wasn't even sure whether I would have been hired if they had known that I was trans.
These men have all told women not to talk about the issues that this raises. These men and their friends have launched an unprecedented amount of abuse towards women, screaming at them at rallies and protests, even assaulting them. Women were told not to talk about it. A lot of these men, who haven't had any gender change surgery, remember, call people who have had the surgery scum. They regularly post online about how much they hate women, yet television shows, movies and magazines still promote them wholeheartedly. Women who question this are called bigots, and many have been banned from social media for even innocently asking questions about it. These men are going into schools and children's groups to talk about how they are real women and how anyone who disagrees with them is hateful.
Shoes on the drag queen go stomp, stomp, stomp.
Many post online about how much they want to help children and young people change their gender, including convincing them to take puberty-blocking drugs, hormones, or even have irreversible surgery, often without their parents knowing about it. And women have been arrested for speaking out against that. Women have been called bigoted and transphobic for disagreeing with almost any aspect of this gender ideology, even if it affects their children. Meanwhile, these men appear in debates about womanhood, even though they're males with fully intact male genitals.
You cut that out now, or you'll go home in an ambulance.
Yeah, that seems mildly inappropriate for a political discussion.
Some academics have written entire papers on how being transgender is a real thing, relying on junk science and easily debunked research to do so.
Gender is a different phenomenon. It is still biological, but it is a neurochemical construct.
And women were told that they were bigots and transphobes for pointing out the flaws in these papers. Governments across the world have sided with these men, despite the protests of women. In some cases it has made them look extremely stupid, yet they still continue to push this mad ideology. And people have had their children taken away from them for speaking out about it. Some politicians even said that no one was allowed to talk about it.
It is something that shouldn't be said.
Worst of all, some of these men have used a transgender identity to get close to women to assault them, or have assaulted them and then claim to be transgender in order to get placed into women's prisons. This is happening right now. Women opposed to this infiltration into their sex class have faced abuse, threats and violence. Some have even lost their jobs, all because they didn't think that these men were real women. And these women need you to support them. You do it for your football team, so why wouldn't you do it for your wife, your daughter, your sister, your mother, your girlfriend, whichever women you have in your life? Speak out about it, amplify their voices, but most importantly, listen to them. Thanks for watching. If you want to support us and help spread this message, please like and subscribe and all that stuff. The more subscriptions we get, the more people will see this and our other videos. If you'd like to donate to us, you can do so using our PayPal. It gets spent on coffee and cookies while we make these videos. You can follow us on social media too. We'll see you next time.